Hey guys, welcome to the Mindful Over Mindless series. This is Dr. Tamazur. I'm a psychologist, and today's topic is Desi patients and Caucasian therapist. And here with me is.
I'm Shumoel, and I'm currently a student in mental health counseling, getting my master's.
All right. So Shumoel, I really wanted to talk to you about this because I read the research that South Asian people, South Asian people do not really go to therapy, and when they do, they are 4 times more likely to drop out than the other Americans. And that made me wonder that what could be the reasons for that? That why South Asians are not going to therapy, and that is obviously this research stays true for US. So they don't go for therapy. I could think of many reasons, but I would like you to highlight them first. And B, when they do, why do they drop out?
So it's important to have a good therapeutic relationship, and it's sometimes difficult to find a therapist who you can relate to. And then with South Asians specifically, I think the issue lies is that they don't feel understood when they go to therapy. So it's important to create a foundation of a good relationship that's warm, empathetic, and understanding. But what happens is that South Asians share their problems and they don't feel like the therapist understands them. A lot of issues, I believe, like the initial steps probably are resolved and the initial issues are resolved, but when they get deeper into their issues, they aren't able to resolve them or they aren't able to understand them. And I think there's a huge cultural barrier between the two that prevents that from occurring.
Yeah, interestingly, I would like to dive into my own example. That when I was doing my master's in US, I did go to therapy, and I couldn't connect with my therapist because she was trying to understand my family dynamics, and she was unable to understand my family dynamics. And I think that was because of the cultural difference. And I did drop out of therapy. But also, Shumoel, even Desi therapists make these mistakes because I remember when we were in med school, my best friend, she was very depressed. She was feeling very depressed, so she wanted to go take therapy. So she went to a psychologist, and when she started her therapy, the psychologist suggested her to take some space from her mother. And interestingly, she came back and she told me that how is that possible? Like, I'm literally a student, and clearly we were in Pakistan at the moment, so she was a student and she was living with her mother and her siblings. But how was she supposed to create a space or take some space from her mother? So that was clearly not possible. But these therapists suggested that, and she said. I remember after a while when she resolved the issues, she said that interestingly the therapist did advise me to put some boundaries. However, I kind of found my peace by resolving and having communication with my mother rather than putting up more space in between us. So this was really interesting for me at that time as well. And now as a therapist, I look back and I think, wow, therapist actually gave a solution that's more bookish, because we also study the same books, and we also study the American books, and though there's a lot about multiculturalism, however, we are also we also tend to talk in the same language, like put up some boundaries, have some space, which is all right, but might not work for our culture. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that a lot of the theories that we study are westernized theories, and though there is an influence, or there is a significant amount of conversation about multiculturalism and creating a warm and empathetic and understanding environment, what I think happens a lot of time, well, specifically in the US, is that in the sessions, the client just ends up trying to explain their own dynamics, their own history, their own cultures and family values and everything, that it ends up more so being a learning experience for the therapist than actually a good therapeutic session for the client. And it's really hard. It's difficult to try to understand another culture when you grew up in a certain in a certain culture. And then a big thing is that we study a westernized therapeutic process. So all of the theories and the techniques are from a Western perspective. So it's hard to try to incorporate that culturalistic dynamic into it and those values. And I think the thing about boundaries is really important is that, of course, healthy boundaries are important, but sometimes it's difficult to do because what a person may perceive as a healthy boundary could be offensive to their family member. It could be offensive to their parent or their siblings. And it's like, there has to be something that can be incorporated into the therapy that could benefit South Asians. And I think that that's what the issue is that they go to start explaining their family dynamics or what's going on in their households, and the therapist just doesn't understand why they aren't able to implement certain techniques to help them, but they aren't because it just doesn't work for them. You just can't put up boundaries in a Desi household.
Yeah, I mean, like I asked this question on my Instagram that do you think that putting up boundaries could work for in our culture? And majority of the people said no. Only like few, like 2 to 3 people said yes, but majority of the people did say no. And so, if the boundaries doesn't work, what really would work? Because if you really can't have that kind of space, for example, for the therapist suggested my friend to have some space between you and your mother, but she couldn't. Like, how would she? She was living in that particular house. How would you actually establish some space? But so what for her communication work? She said that communicating with my mother was the solution. For me, I think I would say the same thing for me. When I have had issues, I don't think that, giving some space has worked ever, because it's really not possible to give space if you're living in the same household, and we do live in the same house. Kind of like also involving another sibling has worked. Like, for example, I've involved other siblings, like, why don't you communicate? So this is the issue that I'm having. Why don't you communicate it with my parents? Or why don't you communicate it with my other siblings? So that has worked for me. How about you? What do you think has worked for you? And what do you think, as a counselor, would you suggest someone? If someone is saying, for example, someone says that, I have a toxic relationship with, or my mother is toxic, or, my parents are toxic, and I have a little toxic relationship with my mother.
So I think it's really important to first address the intentions of that person as well. Like, sometimes a person would come in with their own viewpoint of it, and communication is definitely a big key aspect of things. And I think something that could possibly be an option is if both parties seek counseling together. So family therapy and group counseling are major aspects, and to really eliminate a barrier or like a misunderstanding between the two, it could definitely be beneficial to go to counseling together or to seek family therapy if that's something that is a huge issue, because sometimes I feel for certain clients communications may not always be the key. Like, it may not work. Their parents could still take things the wrong way. They could try to explain their point of view, and it could still erupt into something that's not a positive thing in the household. And so I definitely think that could be a solution for it.
I'm glad you said that, and I really want to address South Asian people and tell them that they need to get therapy and they need to get family therapy as well, and they need to get couples therapy as well. And there's this huge resistance to therapy in South Asian culture. So they need to get rid of that resistance, and when they do, when they start taking therapy, I would suggest, if they are unable to make that kind of connection with the Caucasian therapist or with the therapist from another culture, then they can opt for a South Asian therapist. We are here because of a reason, and that's what I promote as well, that I'm South Asian, and I think I could help first generation immigrants and the immigrants as well, because I understand the problems they go through, they face. So yeah, they can get the therapist of their own culture, but also I would say that I think that South Asians in general, they really do not understand the concept of therapy. I know the awareness is increasing, but they also kind of like expect suggestions, because I've worked with all kinds of populations in US, and being in Pakistan, obviously I'm subjected to Pakistani people. So I do think that they have little different expectations. For example, people abroad, they only understand that it's going to help them in a certain way. It could be a lifestyle change, it could be a behavioral change. However, people in Pakistan do look for suggestions, they look for life advices, but that is something a therapist is not there to give you. A therapy is more about supporting you, supporting your mental health, and actually giving you that clarity so you could make those decisions, right? So I would, it's my plea to South Asian therapists that even if they start taking the therapy, do not get disappointed in the beginning. Just follow through with the sessions. Do not drop out, and that's what's happening. The dropout rate is way higher for them. So please don't drop out. Rather stick to therapy and see what it unfolds, because it really unfolds a lot of clarity. It gives you a bigger picture. So what would you like to say to our South Asians listeners?
Yep. So I think one big point is that therapy isn't there to solve your problems or give you answers. It's there to give you the tools to solve your problems. Because of course you might come to therapy with a certain problem, and a therapist could give you the answer to that. But then what are you going to do when you're stuck in another situation? Like you need the tools to be able to solve problems. And I think that's really important to highlight, is that it's not there for life advice. It's there as a helping tool to allow you to make better decisions and solve your own problems, manage your stress, whatever it is. And I think another thing that is important that we learn about is setting goals in therapy. So knowing and being aware of like what the outcome could be and how it could help you. So setting goals, reevaluating those goals, seeing that. And I think that if they're exposed to that, or if they truly try to understand the process, it would be beneficial for them as well. And to get rid of that belief that therapists are just there to solve your problems, because that's not what therapy is. That's not how it works. And I think like definitely in terms of Americans and South Asians in America, it's important for them to be open to seeking therapy. Like if your child, teenager, adolescent wants to do that to try to help you, to try to help the family dynamic, it's important to be open to that and understand that. Now, the issue comes in is that there aren't many South Asian therapists in the U.S. In the state of Connecticut, there are exactly 2. Yep, there are 2.
Wow,
yep, there
really?
are 2. There's a woman and there's a man. And I don't want to say anything, but they don't have the best reviews about them necessarily. Yes. And I know from a personal friend of mine who actually saw both of them that it was extremely useless and she was not able to seek. So it's so difficult. I think we need to make the resources of that more available to people, that you can see a therapist that is from your own culture.
So Shumoel, interestingly, a lot of immigrants and first generation immigrants are my clients, and one of my patient who lives in US, she lives with her in-laws, right? And she had been having a lot of issues with her in-laws, so she took therapy for that. So when we were discussing that, she said that she actually did take therapy from a Caucasian person, and she said that the first thing the therapist suggested was that why don't you just move out of the house, why you're living with your in-laws, why you're living with your brother-in-law and his wife. I mean, like, is that normal? And she was like, so a lot of time was wasted in making her understand the family dynamics in a Desi culture. And then, she had me. So I never once said to her that, move out, because we did discuss that. Like, do you think that moving out is an option? And she said that, no, it's not. And then, it was never discussed. So I'm not saying, I mean, like, I've obviously some of my greatest teachers are, I've learned so much from them. They're great therapists. But what I'm saying is that there are some intricate cultural differences with people from other culture wouldn't be able to understand. And I've heard these stories from my patients and other people. Have you heard any story like that? Have you encountered something like that?
Yeah, I definitely have. It's definitely been a topic of discussion in which that we need more access to that. And my own personal thing. So I had a therapist for a really long time, and I genuinely really loved her, and she helped me so much in dealing with my anxiety and getting over my obsessions with planning and stuff, like so many things she helped me with. But as soon as it came to my family's problems, it was just so difficult for her to understand. She said some really good things about like parents' intentions and stuff like that, but they'd be like, at the end of the day, it's your life and you have to do what makes you happy. And I get that. I do get that. But if I know that something will, it's just hard. It's just hard to grasp your head around that. Like, it's just hard to try to understand it when that's being told to you, when you're like, well, no, because I also need to make sure that my parents aren't unhappy with my decisions. So not that in the sense that they tell you to leave your family, of course, but there's a huge concept of cutting out the toxic people in your life, even if they're your family members. But I just don't think that that's always possible, and especially not in Desi cultures, because you can't just cut out family members because you think they're toxic. That just doesn't go. It doesn't work like that.
Also, there are some customs that other people from other cultures really do not understand. One being cousin marriage, and it's so common in Pakistan, and it's so common in Muslims. But I really don't know about the rest of the Muslim population, but I really know about that. It's really common in Pakistan, and it's really frowned upon in other cultures. It's frowned upon in Christians, so that kind of creates a stigma. I had one of my patients, and she said that she's married to her cousin, and she wanted to explain. I understood the family dynamic she was talking about, but she said that she had been in therapy with someone else with a person from a different culture, and she said that they didn't frown upon them, but they couldn't just understand that how does that work if you're married to your cousin? Like, if it's the same family, then how's the issues playing their part? So that's another issue, but there are also some other customs as well. For example, I was reading Priyanka Chopra's memoir, and she said that her cousins came and lived with them for a while. Her cousins from US, they came and lived with her for a while, and she also went to US and she lived with her cousins and her aunt for a while. And she's like, whenever I tell these two people in US, they're like, oh wow, like how come someone gives their kid to another, the aunt and uncle, to a khala or a mamu, and ask them to take care of that kid for 1 or 2 years. But the thing is, that is very, very common in our culture. It's really common because that's what we are. We are a collectivistic society, and it's okay for us to give our children for like 2 years and say, why don't you live with your aunt for 2 years? And we're like, okay, yeah, that's not a bad idea, but it's so difficult for another person to understand. I'm pretty sure someone who's not from this culture would consider abandonment issues, though I really don't think that those people are having abandonment issues. Rather, on the contrary, I would say that those people actually grow out to be more confident, who have a lot of supportive aunts and uncles, not the non-supportive aunt, but obviously the people with the larger the pack, the more the confidence.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I went and moved away, and I lived in Pakistan for a year with my grandparents and my aunts. And so it was something that was very normal for people. And then I do remember that it was kind of shocking whenever I told people that, yeah, like I moved away from my parents for a year at the age of 12. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal at all. And it was something, I think that is something that we consider family. Even like people that the U.S. society would consider extended family isn't considered extended family. Like our aunts, our uncles, our grandparents, they're not extended family. They're our direct family. Extended families could be like beyond that, second and third cousins, but first cousins aren't extended family. And they're a part of your direct and immediate family. And I think that actually that reminds me of a funny story in which I was in a therapy session and I was telling my therapist about my support system. And she's like, 1 second, I need to draw this out. And she pulled out a literal whiteboard and wrote all, to understand the relations. And she wrote every single person's relation out. And I was just like, yes. So I'm close to them, not close to that side, not then this and that. I was trying to explain to her everything. And it was just like, and I was like, yeah, no, that's my direct family. That's my immediate family there. And then beyond that is my family that's not immediate, essentially. And so I think that is definitely a big thing as well. And it's just so hard because when it creates more people in which you could not necessarily have conflict, but it creates more people. So yeah, I guess you could have a bit more conflict as well within that because it's such a bigger group. So you're not just dealing with conflict with your parents and brothers. You also have to learn how to deal with conflict with those other family members and resolve problems and stuff. And so I think that is also a big factor in which they aren't able to get that help or that understanding because a Caucasian therapist would be like, okay, just don't see your aunt then, or just don't interact with them in that way. But it's hard because you're so close to them. Even if you're not living together, you're just so close to them.
Okay, boundaries are great. Boundaries are very healthy and they're obviously very necessary. But sometimes when you talk to a therapist and you tell them that, oh, my mother really is very intrusive and she asks me questions like when I get home, she asks me, so what did you do with your day? Where were you? Or when I'm late, she calls me or asks me, right? And then a therapist in this situation would say that, why you actually let your mother ask this question? You should actually put up a boundary and tell your mother that, I'm not comfortable you asking me this question when I'm late. Where am I? But it just can't work for our culture. It just can't. You cannot tell a Desi mom that, I'm not comfortable you asking me where I am, right? It just cannot happen. And and that's why we are so good at lying, because we have been trained that way to lie. But the thing is that we cannot really put up a boundary like that. It can be some other way that boundary can be put up, like maybe in a very empathic manner. You could tell your mother that if I cut your call, please understand I'm with my boss or something like that. I'm with a colleague, and when I'll get back, I'll answer to that. But you really cannot say that such bluntly, that I'm not comfortable you doing this, or I'm not comfortable you barging into the room. You really cannot. You have to make a way around that, and you have, because this is our culture, and it's really difficult to understand. It's really difficult to understand that why we cannot do that, why we cannot put up a boundary like that.
It's just the way we are, the way we're brought up, the values we believe in, and it doesn't. And I think a huge thing is that therapists or white therapists think that this will solve our problems, but that's not true. It doesn't help us, essentially. Like, that's not what the issue is. And I think that that's where that lack of understanding comes from, is that they're like, okay, yes, it's annoying, but you're not understanding what I'm trying to say about the situation.
I remember this is one situation where, a friend of mine, even with friends, because, with Desi friendships are different. They're just different. And I cannot explain that to someone. Maybe I try my best. Like, for example, my friend in Pakistan, she asked me that, my car is malfunctioning, so can I have your car? So that is a very normal request, right? That is a very, very normal request. But that's not a normal request in US. Right? That's not something you could request you could ask your white friend without being, I would say, making things awkward between you two. For example, this actually came up, this question came up during our training sessions, and all right, so a friend did ask me to have the car, and I couldn't give them the car, and my teacher, she said that, you should have just said no. No is enough. You don't need to give any explanation. It's your car. You could just say, no, I'm not going to give you the car. But she didn't understand that, we are Desis and we live together and we die together. And I really cannot tell that to a Desi friend, because not only she'll be offended, she'll be hurt. So I have to give her certain kind of explanation. I have to explain it to her, or either I have to give her the car. And it is easier to give a car. But that's how we are, and it's really difficult to explain. So people, even I remember that people ask me, so you're gonna make yourself uncomfortable, wouldn't that affect your friendship as well? And I'm like, yeah, that would, but you're not understanding that it's not a solution. I could not say no, just like, no, that's not gonna happen. That I cannot, because this is not the kind of friendship we have very intimate relationships with our friends as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that actually, on a smaller scale, that I've had that experience in which in the US, when I tell my friends no, I can't hang out, it's like, okay, that's fine, whatever. And when I come to Pakistan and my friends there that I made when I was living there, I'll be like, no, I can't hang out, and the next thing you know, they'll be at my door. Like, irregardless of whether I said no, I can't hang out, and it doesn't matter because they wanted to come see me. And it's not a bad thing. Like, I feel like sometimes that can be perceived as like, oh, they're crossing a boundary, or they shouldn't do that because you said no. And it's like, it's not like that. It's hard to explain as to why that doesn't bother me. Like, it is hard. Like, it's just hard to explain that, no, they really weren't crossing a boundary by just, like, they weren't. Not for me, at least. And it's not that I have unhealthy boundaries. That's not what it is. It's just, like you said, it's just a part of our culture. We're just so into each other's lives and together all the time that it's just something that's normal.
Yeah. I remember when I was a student, so I had friends over for combined study sessions, and I remember when I didn't invite them, then even they were here, right? And this is just a Desi thing. In US, it wasn't possible. It's like, it's not only crossing a boundary, it's considered rude, and it's considered very, very selfish that you're not valuing other person's time. They could be doing something else with that time. But on the contrary, our friends would be like, it's okay, you can do something else with my time, I'm just gonna tag along.
Definitely. That's another big thing, is that they'll just like sit around in your house. Like, you could be off doing something else and they don't, like, it's so normal to be like doing other things. Like, so many times there'll be friends over and they'll like leave to go do something else, and they'll just be sitting there with your family, because that's not even like just best friends. It's literally like, I mean, it's your close friends, but it's not even just like one singular person. It's just like that you just do that.
And that starts from such a young age, because people in US, like, they literally teach their children to voice it out that they are feeling uncomfortable. And when the children do say that, the parents kind of respect that. They're like, the kid, they actually teach the kid to say that, they say that you're uncomfortable, and then when they say they respect, so they actually teach their children to put up a boundary and then respect it. And the parents do it. It's vice versa. The parents put up a boundary with the kids. I'm not liking this behavior, I'm not doing it. But however, in Pakistan, I'm not saying that we actually cannot be rude to our parents at all. However, we cannot be rude in this. See, this is a very interesting and a very difficult concept to explain to someone who's not from this culture. But on one hand, we cannot really say anything rude to our parents, but on the other hand, we really do not have a boundary. Like, our parents are intertwined in our life, and they would just give up anything. Not to say that I would say that our parents are more loving, but I would say that they are so intertwined with our lives that they would kind of give up anything for us. And I guess that's what collectivistic society is. That's what it is about. It is about like having no boundaries within their families. So it really is difficult to explain it to someone, but at the same time, and also I think that is one reason that people feel like people who migrate, they feel that friends here are a little, though they are great friends, but they are a little resistant, or a little withdrawn, or a little cold. Then cold than the friends back home, right? Because they were warmer, and you wouldn't understand like what's this cold and warm, but I do. I mean, like, I understand, because I couldn't tell a friend, if my friends ask for my car, I can't say no. I cannot say no, and I don't know how to explain that to someone else.
Yeah, and I think it's a difficult concept. And this is where the issue lies, is that these small intricate details. As a whole, a Caucasian therapist would be able to help a client, but when it gets into these small itty-gritty details of things, how much can you truly explain? And to kind of tie it all back, I think that that's also a reason why a lot of South Asians do drop out of therapy in the US, is because they're like, okay, how much more am I going to explain to this person? And they just don't see the benefit. Like, how much more can I tell them about this? And like how much more do I have to say? Like, it's just hard, and they just don't feel that connection or that understanding. And we have a lot of values, I would say, or like, I don't know what the right word would be either. A lot of little like things that we just have to do because we just have to do them. It's just the way we were brought up. It's just the way we were raised. You just have to go out of your way to help someone else, help a friend out, help a family member out. It's just the norm. You can't say no, like you said. You really can't to a lot of things.
Yeah, and I know it's the Desi culture, but there are other cultures like that as well, because I know some African cultures are like that as well. They're so collectivistic that they really can't say no to their friends and their family. They have to do certain things for them, and though it's not directly their family, like because I remember a friend of mine, I'm not going to name that person, but I remember he used to drop off and pick up his niece and nephews from school, and we literally I even once said that you are not doing your work and you're literally taking care of your niece and nephews, and he's like, yeah, because our family comes first, and I understood in a second. But I don't think if his therapist wouldn't be able to, then that would be really tragic story, because his therapist also needs to understand that despite his boundaries being shattered, or despite his work being a second priority, he has to, or he this is something that comes with being born in a particular
definitely.
culture,
and it's not. And I think what's important for us to highlight is that this isn't bad. It's not something that, that sucks for you guys that you don't have that. Like, this is just something that we have, and it needs to be accepted and like understood. And actually, as I was saying that, my mom just called me like 3 times and I missed her call. But it's never just one call. But it's just something that needs to truly be understood, and it's hard to get that, but I definitely think it's possible. Like, what do you think, what are some of your suggestions for someone who genuinely wants to learn and be able to counsel South Asians who's maybe Caucasian or from a different culture?
I mean, spend more time with them. I think if you really make friends from every kind of culture, and then like intimate friends, like friends you could actually talk about, like talk heart to heart, and have great lengths of discussion with them. Obviously I would suggest someone who wants to counsel South Asians to make South Asian friends, have lengthy discussions about their culture, understand the dynamics, spend some time at their house, at their home. And I think that would give them the skills to understand that. And obviously it's not mission impossible. You can obviously understand if you invest enough energy and enough time. But do you think that's practical? I don't think that's practical. That's why I think that even counselors kind of like promote other people from diverse backgrounds to become counselors. So clients do have that, people do have that kind of variety, that they can actually choose and pick counselors from every culture.
That's true. And I think that we do need people of different cultures in the counseling field, and I think that that's a huge disconnect as well, especially in the US, although mental health is really given importance and stuff, but a lot of times there isn't the availability of having counselors of all different cultures, and I think that that's really important. Another thing that I could suggest is that like a counselor remain judgment free, like that could help. And it's like, of course, that some sessions may be in which they are learning from the client, but I guess the only way that they could is if they do have intimate friends from different cultures who they could truly understand from. It's really difficult. It is really difficult, but I think with the right education and exposure and beyond what we learn in our classes, because I'm telling you, it's not enough. What we learn about multicultural is in our classes alone is just not enough. So I think going beyond that and expanding your understanding and knowledge is important as well.
So I remember we had a lot of homework for holidays. Sometimes those unfortunate thing happened that we had a lot of homework in a sense that we had to do our thesis. So there was a lot of homework, and I remember one of my American friends, she said that I was just doing on Christmas, I was just doing my homework, and her daughter came to her and said that we need to visit grandparents because they're getting really old and they're getting really lonely and we need to visit them. So she realized, oh my god, my daughter is telling me that I should visit my parents. I stopped my work, though I didn't want to, but I stopped my work and I visited my parents. But on the contrary, in a Pakistani culture, I was thinking how impossible the thought would be only that on Eid I'm working or I'm doing my work instead of visiting my parents. So if I'm in the same city, then obviously I have to visit my parents or I have to be with my parents on Eid day. But however, in her culture, like in an American culture, it was completely accepted. I mean, she did stop her homework and visited her parents, but still, it was kind of, she was thinking of not going, and we cannot think of even that.
No, 100%. And I know that that's a huge issue with work as well, is that they give you that one holiday off. And this actually happened in my work the other day, in which they're just like, yeah, at the end of the day, you have to work. Like, you can't, like one of my coworkers is telling me one of her cousins can't come to Thanksgiving because she just has to work. And so that's fine. And I'm like, that is not fine. And I have taken a week and a half off to go drive to Connecticut if I don't go home for a day that we have off. It's not because it's Thanksgiving, it's just because those are the days we have off, so obviously I have to accommodate that. And I'm like, there's no way that I can't not go see my parents while I have the day off. Like, it's just not possible. Even though it's a 12 hours drive away, I have to go see them and I have to go see my family for the holidays.
Yeah. So, some things are really inexplainable to people from other culture. However, Shumoel, it was a great discussion. So how about we wrap it up? And, so please guys leave a comment and add to the discussion. We would love to go through your suggestions about what you want to listen to next. So give us some topics, give us some suggestions, and leave your comments. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at Mindful Over Mindless. We look forward to talking about more topics soon. Bye.